Okay, so we've got a pumpkin and sage risotto for you today. Risotto is one of those great sort of Italian dishes. You can put almost anything in it, any veggies you've got. If you're not a vegan, just a vegetarian, if you want to use the cheese at the end, you can use the cheese, I'll explain. But if you don't do the cheese, then you can just leave it out also, it's just as good. So I'm going to start by making a really quick vegetable stock to cook our rice in. So I'm going to take a carrot, I'm going to leave just a small part of it aside to put actually in the risotto. The rest of it, just cut up roughly. Vegetable stock's just a way to get a bit more flavour into something. So we'll pop those in. Got a pot on, it's come up to heat. Same thing with celery, I'll leave just a small piece aside to go in the actual risotto. Pop those in. So got 2 bay leaves, the tree outside. If you don't have fresh ones, dry is fine. Little bunch of thyme leaves. And we'll take 1 tomato. And some cracked pepper in there. If you like, you can use whole peppercorns too. This is a way of just getting a bit more flavour into the risotto rather than just cooking the rice in plain water. So we basically will let this come to the boil now. Simmer ideally 20 to 30 minutes, but also if you're in a hurry and just want to get things going, 10 or 15 minutes you'll find to be enough to get the flavours out of the vegetables. In the meantime, we're going to make a little herb puree, sort of similar principles to pesto, but I'm going to use quite a lot of parsley, a little bit of basil, a little bit of sage, a little bit of oregano. So we're using quite a mixture of herbs here. So we'll get our jug, pop it on, click it in place. We'll pop the herbs in. Some extra virgin olive oil. Pepper. Touch of sea salt. Meanwhile, our vegetable stock's just come up to the boil, so we'll turn that down so she's just simmering. So if you did want to make it exactly like a pesto, I'm going to use some cashew nuts in here. When you make pesto or something like that, you want to puree the herbs with the oil first, get them really fine. Then you'd add the nuts next. So I'm going to use some cashew nuts. Traditionally in pesto you use pine nuts, but we're putting pine nuts in the risotto anyway. I just find by putting nuts in with this dish, you're adding that sort of richness that cheese or butter would normally be used in restaurants. So here, I like to keep the nuts a little bit of coarseness to them, which is why we puree the herbs in oil first. A little bit longer, but too coarse still. We'll pop that off. That can just sit to one side now. Our stock's coming along nicely there. And we'll just take a little bit of that scum coming from some of the vegetables. Not so much will come here. Just pop it there onto that lid. Get a lovely flavour coming from those thyme leaves, the vegetables and the bay leaves. In the meantime, we'll get our vegetables ready to go. I'll turn our pan, start it just on a low heat while we're chopping things up. Celery once again. So these ones are going to be actually in the risotto, so we want it to be a nicer shape. Just in little cubes. Same with the carrot. I'm going to use some grapeseed oil. It's got your vitamin E in there, antioxidants. So traditionally when making risotto, you're using quite a lot of oil, so something without cholesterol is also beneficial. Now pumpkin also. In doing this dish, there's a couple of ways you can do it with the pumpkin. Today I'm going to put the pumpkin in through while cooking the rice, so it's basically going to break down and become a part of the sauce. Another way you can do it is you can roast the pumpkin first in the oven, giving it a sort of nice caramelized color, and then mix the pumpkin through towards the end, so it just sort of lightly breaks down in there, but still you have some whole pieces. Both ways work fine. We'll pop our carrot and celery in. Give a little pinch of the asphodel. Hold off on the pumpkin for now because we don't want it to go too soft right away. Just gently sweat those for a moment on a medium sort of heat. Same time I've got the arborio rice. It's been soaking here. I've got a cup and a half we're using today. Strain that off. I'll pop the rice in. Let's turn that heat down on low for a moment. Meanwhile, our veggie stock's looking fine to go, so I'll take that off the heat, strain it, one back. We can turn risotto up. Risotto should always be cooked on a reasonably high heat, medium to high. It needs almost constant attention once you start. So here now, we're just going to simply add our vegetable stock. We'll just ladle it in as we go, letting the rice soak it up as it goes. Let that come to the boil first. In the meantime, I've got my sage leaves. I'm going to chop these. They don't need to be finely chopped, but I'm just going to julienne them so we've got little thin strips of sage going through there. We'll add those in towards the end. Stage, give it a little seasoning and we'll check it again towards the end. So as you can see, it's coming to the boil. So at this point, you basically want to stay here and just keep stirring. And you just keep adding more vegetable stock as you go. It helps if you're keeping that stock reasonably warm as well, and that way you want it to stay boiling the whole time. Once it comes to the boil, you want to keep it that way, not sort of letting it cool down and then heat up again. It's coming along nicely there, still boiling away, keeping that constant sort of stirring motion. If you do keep it on a really high heat, make sure you don't walk away from it for too long. Meanwhile, I'm just turning a pan onto the heat here, and we're going to lightly toast our pine nuts. Pine nuts are actually technically seeds, not nuts. For whatever reason, we're in the habit of calling them pine nuts, so we won't change now. When you're cooking the risotto, you want to make sure it's not sticking in any area of the pot down below. And also make sure you don't have pieces climbing up on the side that are going to be raw if they get knocked back in. So just keep everything in the center. Risotto's fantastic sort of dish. You can use so many types of vegetables there you can use. And like I said at the start, if you do eat cheese, feel free to throw the cheese in. Cheese you mix through basically right at the end, but if you're putting the cheese in, you often need to add a little more liquid because it's going to thicken it up a little bit. It'll add that richness to it. Traditionally parmesan's used. It's not easy to find a vegetarian parmesan around the place. Fetta's quite nice on top and the end, or you can just use any good tasty vegetarian cheese. So it's starting to bubble up a little bit there, so I'm just going to turn it down. So we're almost there. So as you can see, pumpkin holding its shape, but at the same time it is starting to break down, and the sauce is starting to become orange also. So it's quite nice when you get a little bit of both, the orange, the sauce, and also a few whole pieces left. Pine nuts have a lovely flavour when they're toasted. Often you see risottos at restaurants and they taste so wonderful and you think you're eating rice and it's really healthy, but when you eat a risotto in the restaurant, there's a high chance it's going to have a lot of cream in it, a lot of butter in it, and a lot of cheese in it. So risotto can be quite fattening if it's not made in a sort of conscious way. The pine nuts, I've got enough heat in that pan now. I've got them nicely toasted. It's quite an art cooking risotto rice, because it's similar to pasta in a sense. When you cook it correctly, you want to have a tiny bit of bite left in the grain of rice. It's not like cooking basmati rice or anything, and that's why you're using that complete short grain. And if you actually bite one piece of rice in half, you should see a tiny little bit of pearly white colour in the very centre, where it's still just got a little firmness to it. Just check our rice now and see how it's taking shape. Good to go. Still a little bit of bite. We'll just soak up this last bit of liquid in there and that'll be enough stock for it. Give it a little more seasoning at this point. And I'm going to turn that off the heat now. And just let it slowly finish off in the pot. We'll add our sage. Let that flavour go through. Pumpkin and sage are two things that go really, really well together. And I've got a bowl of mixed greens here. I've got some spinach and silver beet. Just gently mix these through. Just add a little bit of colour in. And pine nuts can go in. You can save a few to sprinkle on top. So you can see we timed it pretty much perfectly with the pumpkin, where it's really starting to break down now, but you've still got some whole pieces in there, which is what we're after. Yes, we're not using any cheese in this one, we're not putting any butter or any cream. What I am going to do to add a little bit of richness in there, and just give it 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. You'd only want to put this in right at the very end, once it's stopped boiling. Mix that all through gently. And find that combination of pine nut, sage, pumpkin, and then the wilted greens. It's a fantastic combination in a risotto. We'll just give that one last taste. Excellent. So we'll get ourselves a plate ready for this one. Spoon that gently onto the plate. As you can see, we've got the nice colours there. We've got the orange, the green. Still got some whole pieces of pumpkin. Plus you've got a bit that's mashed through into the sauce. Give a little bit of our herb puree. Go for a little spoon on top. And I'll just put a couple of drops around the edge of the plate. And if you've got a couple of nuts left, sprinkle 1 or 2 on top, a couple around the edge. There we go, you've got pumpkin sage risotto, fresh pine nuts and a bit of that nice herb puree. Enjoy.